And welcome everybody to another episode of Leica Conversations. I'm Tom Smith. I'll be your host for today's program. Today's guest, Arthur Meyerson, is simply universally recognized as one of the finest color photographers there is. And, he has had for decades a commercial and editorial career, was 3 times named Adweek's Southwest Photographer of the Year. American Photo magazine named him one of the top 30 American advertising photographers. And beyond the success he's had with his commercial work, as a teacher, mentor, workshop leader, he's influenced countless photographers. He's produced 2 monographs, The Color of Light and The Journey, and we're in luck today because we get to find out some of the stories behind his journey in photography. Help me welcome Arthur Meyerson.
Hey, Tom.
Arthur.
Good to see
Hey.
you.
Great to see you.
People out there, I can't see you, but I thank you for being here. We'll try to make it a fun day, a fun afternoon. So thanks for being here.
Arthur, thank you so much. We've got, I'm anxious to jump in because I know we have a lot of images and a lot of stories to cover. Also want to encourage the people who are watching, if you've got a question for Arthur, I'm going to take some time and try to weave in your questions, as many as possible, before the end of the show. So feel free to use the Q&A function in Zoom and ask away, and we'll get to your questions. Arthur, I in preparing for this, went through both of your books, and especially the Journey, and there's such a wealth of information in it that can help photographers of all backgrounds. But let's go back to the very beginning here, and we'll bring up an image. I know you've been taking pictures for a long time, but maybe not seriously from the age of 5. Right?
That's a great one to start with. And hey, Tom, got a big surprise for you.
What?
There it is. The Dick Tracy special. This is not the actual camera in the photo, but it is an actual camera from that time period. And it was the one that I guess led me on my way photographically. So apologies to Leica. It's a Dick Tracy model without the secret wristwatch. Yeah, no radio wristwatch.
Well, Arthur, I know you had this career in commercial photography, and you were one of the main photographers for Coca-Cola for many years. But a lot of what we're going to talk about today is your personal work. But I want to mention you didn't go to school for photography. You went to school for journalism. And like many of us, you fell in love, as I understand it, seeing the image come up in the tray in the darkroom.
Absolutely. I think like everyone, that magic was where it started. But I traced it back even further to when I was young, a little bit older than the picture you just saw. But I used to crave every week when those big picture weekly magazines, Life, Look, Geographic, whenever those came out, I was down on the couch pouring through the pictures. And that time frame I just remember so well, and there had to be some kind of a connection to pictures and photography that links me back to that time frame that I really remember. I wasn't doing photography so seriously back then, but photography in those publications definitely connected with me. And it was later on when I went to university and I was in my junior year, I took a course called Photojournalism 101, which is that basic processing and printing course that many of the viewers here, I'm sure, remember and took. And that first moment when the photograph appears on paper in that tray, it was magic. And I always loved magic as a kid anyway, so it was like a double whammy. So that's when I think photography took a serious hold of me, was from that point going forward.
Well, Arthur, I mentioned your first book, The Color of Light, which other than special editions, I understand is sold out, but you still have some special editions available through your studio. Can I ask you to this picture that we're looking at now, and I think magic might be a theme that's going to recur again and again in our conversation today. Magic light, magic moments. How about this moment? How did it happen?
It was an underappreciated, non-expected moment. My wife and I were in Europe. I had just finished up an assignment. I'd been there for about 6 weeks, and we ended up in London. And I told her, I want to go to Stonehenge and I want to shoot the great photo. I want to outdo all the other photos ever been done, something dramatic, bold, beautiful, gorgeous. And it rained the entire time there. When we finally got there, there were very few people. And this was at the time, I don't know now, but at the time, this was as close as you would get. It was roped off. And out of nowhere, the man came mowing the lawn. And at first I was like, oh no, this is going to ruin my big moment. Not exactly what I had in mind. And then, like things do, something else took over, and I thought, humor is good. And this is humorous. And I can remember taking this picture, waiting for this guy to get the same each time. And I could hear the tourists and people behind me, whispering like, he doesn't know it, but that guy's in all of his photos. Well, it was planned as far as waiting for him. It was unplanned as far as expecting a guy to be mowing the lawn in Stonehenge.
Wow.
It's become a favorite.
For sure. I think one of the first images I ever, when I became aware of your work, this one has stayed with me for a long time. And, selfishly, some of the pictures we're going to look at here are personal pictures that, for me, were very influential. And I wanted to hear the stories behind them. And I think if there's one picture that is a signature of yours, this is one that's often referred to.
Yeah, Toothpick. And I was photographing this ranch in West Texas. I'd been photographing on and off for about 8 or 9 years. It really became the first and biggest project I ever worked on. And so every spring and fall roundup, I would find myself out at this ranch documenting the photography, the cowboy life. And the hardest thing to do was really to separate from the cowboys. They didn't particularly like you being in their way. But I won myself over to them in time, usually by providing a case of beer and a couple of bottles of whiskey at the evening campfire, which didn't hurt anything. But there was this one moment, I remember this distinctly. I was sitting up on a fence post. I had brought the cattle in. They were separating them out and branding. And this one guy was down below me. He was squatted down. And out of nowhere, that pristine toothpick stands out. And it's a photograph for me that is not only about the toothpick or the back of a cowboy's hat. A good friend of mine, Sam Abel, looks at this picture and calls it a faceless portrait. And I think he's absolutely right, proving that we don't always have to have a person's face to, a portrait, that you can do it by looking at other elements within the shot. That toothpick certainly says something, because just as all cowboy hats are slightly different depending on each individual, the things they put in the back of their hat bands can vary as well. But you look at this shot and you look at this guy's hat, and you see the layers of dust on the hat. You see it as it mirrors the image of dirt on his denim vest there. And you start to get a feeling for this individual, who he is, and what he does. And again, it's become a very popular image, and it still resonates with me today.
The faceless portrait, I think, is an assignment. We're going to get into some photographic tools and your approach to teaching, but certainly this would be an assignment that anyone could aspire to make. And a great example. How about this?
I was in Santa Monica. I had just left the airport at dawn. In those, and this was still in the days of film, and my assistant and I, we were in a helicopter, and we were just risen above the fog, and we were busy in the back, loading cameras, doing whatnot, and the pilot up front, I hear a big, "Oh shit." And of course, you never want to hear the pilot say that, that is just not standard operating procedure. And I immediately looked up and I said, what? And he said, look there. And he pointed down, and that's what we were seeing. And it was spectacular. I had him make a couple of passes, made the shots. And now my client was also up in the front seat too, which for people that have done commercial work usually know this drill. He's wondering what the hell we're doing, because this has nothing to do with why we're renting a helicopter and flying out at dawn. But I explained to him that I think this was going to be worth it, and we'd still make it to his shot on time and get him something great, which we did. But yeah, this was a very, very unique thing. He said he'd never seen this in 25 years of flying in that area. So being ready, being prepared, and hearing those words from the pilot all came together.
Well, and that seemed to be, a signature of your reputation. Anyone should check out your website, and there's a section under colleagues, and the accolades that your colleagues say of you, I think, speaks to your you as a person, but also your attention to detail and acceptance of nothing but the best in terms of what would make it into your final, the monograph of The Color of Light. But also, here's a question, is how important has it been to you to always make your own pictures, whether it was a commercial job or, just in your own time? How important has that been to your progression as a photographer?
Absolutely necessary, and there was never a question about it. I didn't get into photography initially to become a commercial photographer. I got into photography because I loved making pictures, and I never wanted to stifle myself by not taking a picture. Anything I saw that was worthy, I was going to do my best to capture. I think there's a part of me too that I think a good client, and truly you are only as good as your client. A good client would recognize in a photographer that was constantly looking, making pictures that maybe weren't part of the actual project or ad or brochure, whatever it was you were doing. That enthusiasm, I think, can carry over. At least that was my hope and wish. And it was like doing warm-up exercises if you were an athlete. You do your stretches. Well, your stretches might be, going, seeing a moment, making a few shots, and working a situation for a bit before, you get involved doing whatever the actual assignment may have been. But no, it was always important to do the personal work as well as the commercial work. One fed the other. And a lot of cases, things I learned from what I did in personal work, I was able to carry over into the commercial and vice versa. So, it was a trade-off, but I never really wanted that. In as much as I could, I didn't really want to have the distinction of this is his commercial work and this is his personal work. In fact, as you were saying, a lot of my contemporaries would say, one of the great things about your photos is I can't tell which is a commercial assignment, which is a, personal, and couldn't make me happier by saying that, because I was usually trying to do that.
Arthur, to that point, I bring into this picture, you were already established as a successful commercial photographer. You find out there's an opportunity to spend 2 weeks with a photographer you admired, and you decided to sign up for a workshop. And that leads us to this picture. Could you give us the story on this?
Oh, yeah. The photographer was Ernst Haas, the great color photographer, and it was an opportunity to travel to Japan with him and a group of photographers for a couple of weeks and travel the country and make photos and be in the shadow of that great man. And unbeknownst to me, a relationship evolved and developed from that, where we became not only good friends, but he became a mentor, my first mentor, actually. And one of the places we went during that trip was to this rice planting festival. And this is actually happening at the end of the event. During the event, there's a rice paddy, and there's hundreds of these women in these wonderful outfits that are out in the field. They're planting, there's music. It's a very, very elaborate kind of scene. The only negative is that you had the Japanese media barrel down into the rice paddy as well. So getting a photograph without having them in the shot and hiding, it was problematic. So I patiently waited. I did the best I could, but I patiently waited. And at some point across the rice paddy for me, these women started coming up and out on the bank and lining up like this. And I began making photographs. That lineup of the 5 women there was working beautifully. Great. I loved it. But I just felt like it needed something else. And the something else to me was something to break that perfect pattern of 5 individuals. And that happened when I, out of the corner of my eye, I saw this other woman, the one who's down there walking across, approach, and she breaks the rhythm and pattern of that shot. To me, that's one of the big things that makes the shot. Now, the shot itself is very much about light or lack of light, color, beautiful color. That's because it was raining, which was even more ironic, as that's what they were praying for in their ceremony here. And finally, and most importantly, gesture. And that gesture begins with the tilt of their hats, their body language, their individual way they're standing, their hands, even down to the one down on the far right who's huffed and up and gathering or feeling the raindrops. It was a really, really wonderful moment for me. And it happened to occur on that trip with Ernst and made it even more special.
And he becomes a huge influence. You become friends. And can I ask you, what else did you learn on this trip in terms of gear that stayed with you, in terms of the gear you use?
The biggest thing, the biggest thing ever. Backing up just a bit, I remember the very first day of that trip, I arrived at our first location with a camera bag, about 7 lenses in there, 2 or 3 bodies with motor drives, a tripod. It was a ridiculous amount of gear. And he started laughing at me, and I said, "What's so funny?" And he said, "How do you feel?" And I said, "I feel miserable." And he said, "Here's a suggestion. Go lighter. Tomorrow, come with 1 or 2 cameras, 1 lens or 2 lenses each. That's all you need." And the rule of thumb here was, and has always stuck with me, and it's something I continue to pass on to my students, is the less you carry, the more you see, and the more you see, the more you shoot. Because you're not continually being, weighted down literally by that thing on your shoulders or going across your chest that can weigh a ton. You just don't need all of that stuff. And it was a real eye opener, and it really and truly over time began to influence, I think, how I photographed.
Well, we're going to transition into the journey and set this up a little bit, Arthur. I mean, the Color of Light, again, sold out except for the special edition. Hint, hint, anybody who wants to get the special edition, please reach out to Arthur. We're going to put his information for his website into the chat window and, have all of that there. And also follow him on Instagram, because if you're enjoying these stories, occasionally he'll share the stories on his Instagram as well. But you had this book that was a retrospective. How was your approach in producing the journey different?
The Color of Light was really an attempt to put 40 years at that time, 40 years of personal work between book covers. I had all this personal work. My commercial work had been pretty well seen by, anybody that, looked at that type of work. But the personal work, I didn't feel like it was getting its due. And I was proud of that work. I wanted that work seen. And I thought the only way it's going to get seen is to be able to produce and publish a book. And so that book is very much about personal work and lessons learned from that. When I went to do the second book, I wanted to do something very different. I very easily could have done another volume 2, 3, 4 of The Color of Light, but I really and truly, I thought it was, okay, I'd done that. Now I want to do something different. And the something different really evolved in a conversation that I was having with Ann Wilkes Tucker, who was the former curator of photography at the Museum of Fine Arts here in Houston. Very, very well known and respected. She's a good friend, but she had agreed to do a conversation with me for the book, which at that particular time, I didn't have a real clue as to what I wanted to do, but she said, let's talk. The conversation went on for 3 days, and it really and truly began to form the basis of what the journey would be, which was, it was a look back. It was a look back not only at personal work, but commercial work. It was a look back at teaching, which has always been a very big part of my life. I've been teaching now for 30 years or more. And continuing to do the, personal work as well. So that book is divided up basically into about 3 major sections. The first section is a very, very good conversation between Ann and myself, talking about my background, my history, etc. And then the second part.
It's beyond good, Arthur. It's invaluable, the lessons that are in there, and I think really ingenious. Get us into some pictures here. Ingenious in that the layout of the book follows the conversation in the interview.
Well, and I was very lucky. I had the same designer that I had for the first book. I had Ann, and then the rest was up to me to produce pictures or help come up with the photos. As well as in this book, I did a lot more writing than I did in the first book. And it was mainly talking about process, which is my photographic process, which has to do with visual tools that I acquired over time that actually help me to produce the images I produce, which is one of the things we talk about in my workshop. For instance, this photograph here, one of the tools that we talk about is light. Seems very common, seems very typical, but without light, we don't have photography. And different types of light. This would be the most mundane, worst type of light for most people. Midday light. It's bright, it's heavy shadows. What do you do with it? And early on in my career, I was doing everything with that golden hour light that everybody knows makes anything look good. But I thought if I would enough, I should be able to shoot all day long. And I had to find ways that would allow me to do that. And so one way was looking at bright light and what happens in bright light. I think one needs to acquire an appreciation for all kinds of light. This to me was at a gay pride event in Istanbul, of all places, and I just happened to stumble upon it. Beautiful quality of light that's happening over the flag. And then the group of people that are in line across the other side, some holding the flag, some just passing by. But that combination of that hard light in the background, the soft rolling light that we have here in the foreground. And then what else do we have here, Tom? I know we have another shot. This is one that I call magical light. And the subject, for anyone who doesn't know, this is J. Mazel, the great color photographer in New York and a very dear friend. And this came about through simply we were having a late afternoon cigar in his studio. The light is coming through a series of a half a dozen light panels above the frame there. And so the smoke being produced created this wonderful kind of event that you're seeing there, which he couldn't see, I could. And so I got to make the picture, which aggravated the hell out of him. But hey, so what? Anyway, it made him look good. And it really and truly, it to me is, again, having that awareness, having a camera, all of those things come together, and then taking advantage of the moment until you feel like you've captured something.
It's a great portrait of Jay, and I think you two, in addition to being friends, are brothers in arms in terms of this fascination with color, light, and gesture that is so prevalent in both of your work. Though he remarks on your site that when you have traveled together photographing similar subjects, it infuriates him that often your pictures are better. I was surprised you got that quote out of Jay.
Yeah. Well, it surprised me too. But let me just say before I go any further, I said I had two major influences in my career. One was Ernst, who I didn't have for as long as I would have loved, but I had, and it made a huge impression. The other was Jay, who I've had for 45 years, and that's been a pleasure on so many levels. So to have certain people in your life that can help advance your work, your photography, to have somebody just to share ideas and talk with, this is special, this is unique. And in as much as people can, I highly encourage you to try to get a relationship like that with someone.
Yeah. Well, I know you have been that for a lot of photographers, throughout your career. I want to continue on, and I want to mention to everybody that in the book, you've got 10 of these visual tools. We're only going to touch on a few of them, but this one in particular, perception, I think really is prevalent in so much of your work. How can you speak to that with this picture?
Well, because this is really a very mundane subject. It's a parking garage, and it does something really fascinating. And this came out in my conversation with Anne when we were talking. She actually brought this picture up, and she mentioned how Kandinsky, the painter, talked about how dark colors and dark things recede and light things come forward. And it's very, very prevalent in this shot here, where that's warm sunset afternoon light that's streaking through the garage and through those openings. The railings add to this as well. But yeah, to me, perception is one of those things that a lot of times we take for granted, that people understand or know our photos, and then they'll refer to the photo and it'll be like, oh, no, that's not at all what that is, or no, that's not how that happened. So there's that, and then there's just the perspective of where we are in terms of perception. So it's one of the great things in photography that I think is unique to photography, and we as photographers, in as much as we can, should try to take advantage of it. And you get there by looking for it.
Well, here's one where
this is
I think
my best example.
Yes.
Yeah. I was in Hong Kong, and I was driving in a car. I was in the passenger side, and I saw this thing happen, and I told the guy to stop the car, and I got out, and I had a long lens on my camera. I think it was a 300, and which turned out to be perfect, because when I looked at this, I got right at the point where green meets blue. Now, a lot of you are looking at this, and it's fun because when I do a live presentation, I can see a lot of heads in the audience do this. And it's because your brain wants to turn it. You want to put the blue, which is sky, at the top of the frame, not at the side. What you see here is the green is a wall. It's a tenement building. And so you've got the green wall of the tenement building. The blue, of course, is sky, but all the things extending out into the blue is actually laundry from the various balconies of the tenements. And, again, you talk about perception. I've had people look at the picture and refer to it as the one with the sailboats, and there's no sailboats in there, although I guess if you turn it on its side, they may look boats.
Right. Well, I got to ask you this, Arthur. Do you think that there is a surrealist built in you somewhere? Is that something that seems to be more and more prevalent? Pictures that make people not only ask questions, but also show us the world in a different way. Is that a goal?
No, it's not a goal. It's not a goal. I'm not that good. I'm being serious. I just sometimes I see things like all of us do, and I want to record them. I want to capture them the way I see them. I'm not looking to pull any punches or do any tricks, which to me makes it even better, because when you look at that, you're sure that there's something going on there, but it's as simple as the way I just explained it. So this is what we do as photographers. We go out into the world, we look and see things, and we want to bring them back, not just to leave in your camera or on your computer, you want to share them with the world. And that's always a fun, exciting thing to do, no, regardless of whether it's, a slideshow or a book or a gallery show, whatever it is. That's to me one of the great joys of photography and being a photographer.
I'm going to get one more of your visual tools in here that, in terms of composition, seems to be very important to you. We've got an example, counterpoint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is one I talk a lot about to my class. It's something that a lot of people may be using and not be aware of, or are not using and should be, because it can take the photograph to another level. Very quickly, this was a commercial ad for, look very carefully, I think most of you that don't know the story can tell that the skyline in the background is San Francisco. How do we know that? If you look carefully, you see the pyramid, the Transamerica Pyramid. Thus, that's who the ad was for. But when I was making the shot or doing the shot, what was given to me was, we need a great shot of the building, and I had 3 days to produce it. On day one, I worked from the ground. Day two, I worked from a helicopter flying above it. And day three, I got up at dawn, went across the Golden Gate Bridge. The sun's just starting to come up through the fog, and I look through the rearview mirror, and I'm seeing this. I'm seeing that those cables, those vertical lines are the Golden Gate Bridge, and they're coming into the headlands, which is the other side of the bay there. And I'm seeing the hillside, and I say, this is it. We've got a shot, and jump out. We set everything up, and there's something missing. Something's really bothering me here, and I'm thinking we need something. That something became my term, or a term I've heard often used, counterpoint. I needed a counterpoint, and that counterpoint became my assistant, Charlie, who jumped in the car, rode back on a walkie-talkie, positioned him, and told him what to do. And it makes such a difference to have the counterpoint there as opposed to not. It's a sense of scale. When we see a human figure, we all can relate to that. And it's an add to the overall drama of the photograph. So it's something to keep in mind. Also to keep in mind is all counterpoints are not people. I don't know what else you've picked up for this section, but we'll see.
Well, I think we have another one here. There we go.
Yeah, this is a funny one, actually. This was totally unplanned. This gorgeous room that I'm in was this funky motel in Austin, Texas. And I was sitting up on my bed, and I was playing with my brand new Leica M9. And I was trying to figure out how to do something with it. And in the process, it clicked. And I looked at the back, and oh my God, that eyeball was staring at me. So as much as I'd love to say I took credit and planned this, no, this was actually going on television. It was an eye drop commercial. This time It was all about getting lucky, but it was such a great lucky thing that it's okay, And to me, that eyeball does become a counterpoint to this bizarre-like decor that you find in this little motel room, and the fact that it's staring right back at you.
Well, Arthur, you say you're not a surrealist, but that's a pretty surreal picture. Straight picture, not manipulated at all, which is another hallmark of your approach, but pretty surreal.
Well, I'm not arguing that. I can't say that I planned that. I wish I could have, but I'm being honest with you. Sure.
Well, let's talk about, that's another one here, the color moment. And I'll bring up the example, back referring to the helicopter story. It's not so much that you're planning it, it's that you're prepared. And even when you're waiting in a hotel lobby, you're always looking.
That's right. And this photograph, which was made in Tokyo, in the reception of a hotel that myself and my group was staying at, it was a glass wall, and the glass wall had water running over it 24/7. But I got totally mesmerized with just the visual of looking through this thing and the color. And I began to sit there and look, and while people were checking in, I thought, well, I'm going to spend my time making a picture here. And I began to, and I thought it would be interesting to have, obviously, to have people in the shot. Without it, it's very painterly, but it needed something just like the other shots needed something. And so I had groups of people. I had people on this side of the glass that didn't work as well. It ended up that this one person walking by comes through, and I fire the shutter right as she centers the shot. The shot was done at about 1/8 of a second because and I wanted the motion, a little bit of that water motion on the glass. It was taking a bit of a risk because I knew the person would blur a bit, but behind the glass wall, I didn't think that would be too much of an issue. And then very, very closely, if you zero in on her hand down there, the hand's pretty damn sharp. Now, for you technical geeks, I'll tell you, this was done with a Leica Q at about, I think it was around 1/8 of a second, 12,800 ISO. And that, my friends, is one of the great things about digital that we could not have done on film. It allowed me to make an image like this, and the image ended up becoming the cover of the book, The Journey.
Of The Journey. And you have, I understand, a 30 by 40 of this in your studio. And even at that high ISO, it holds up very well. Beautiful. Yeah. And so you started with, you've had a variety of gear, and it sounds like, in researching past interviews, you switching up your gear every so often is a part of your approach to keep things fresh. But in terms of your first connection with Leica, when did that happen? And how is a Leica small M, or now the Q, how does that fit into the way that you work?
I was shooting with Leica from the very get-go, as soon as I could afford one, that is. And I bought an M4, and that camera was always around my neck. It had I think I generally had a 35 millimeter lens on there, but I had black and white film. And I used that camera, just for lack of a better term, kind of as a diary camera. I was just going to record moments and things throughout my day. My other cameras that I held on my shoulders, around my neck, or that my assistant was schlepping for me, or that we were doing the assignment with, those were color film. But the initial connection with Leica was the M4. Eventually, I went to the 6. After that, to the 7. And then when the 8 came out, I was offered an opportunity to try out the 8, which was the first digital that Leica did. And quite frankly, I didn't like it, and I sent it back. I said, full-size sensor, call me. And the 9 did come out. So I've gone with the 9, and I've gone with the 10. I have the 10P and the Q2 now. The thing is, what I like about the camera is what everybody likes about the camera. They're small. They're not, they're not going to scare people off. It doesn't, weight-wise, it's not going to, rip your shoulder out or give you a neck ache. They're perfect for doing all kinds of photography. Most people associate street photography with the M's, and that's fine, and usually how they were used. But I use them for a variety of things, and I think that they're just excellent. And of course, the lenses that I match with them, I have 3 lenses for my M. I have a 28, a 35, and I have a 50. And the 50 Apo that I have is one incredible piece of sharp glass. I hounded Tom about it for months to see if he could get me a deal, which he couldn't, but I broke down and got one anyway. It's an amazing piece of glass, and as are all their lenses. I don't like to get too hung up seriously about equipment and things, because bottom line is they're a tool, and a lot of people are just as happy, going out with their phone, and most people do. And it's one of the reasons why we as photographers have to work that much to do what we do. There's so much photographic noise out there. Everybody in the world is making pictures that never would have or did before. Why? They did it because They can. It's easy. It's too easy. And so one of the things that I like trying to do with my class, as well as myself, because I do try to practice what I preach, is discipline, and a discipline in how you shoot, in what you shoot, and what you choose to shoot with.
Well,
Sorry,
I promised no, that's excellent, Arthur, and it brings in some questions the audience has asked, and I promised I would include some of their questions. So, to some of what you've just shared, in terms of gear, first, if you only had one lens, what's the one lens you would shoot with the most, or what's the one lens you'd keep?
The one lens I shoot with the most, no, it isn't. It's the 35 millimeter. But you know, I'm kind of on this quest to shoot only with the 50 for a while. It's kind of, I have this method of like, or idea of like using certain lenses up to a point and then putting them away and going with something different. And it's how I started out initially. As you'll know, zoom lenses were terrible back in the 70s when I started shooting. All of us shot with fixed lenses, and you normally saw a photographer with 3 cameras, the 20, you know, something wide, something medium, and something moderately telephoto. And you got to know those focal lengths and how they worked. And you would reach for that focal length and know that that was going to be perfect coverage for what was in front of you.
And do you feel like, you know, the gear has gotten so good, the zoom lenses that are available are very good. Our sensors have gotten so good that you can crop in and have, there's a great deal of versatility that comes with digital. But in terms of craftsmanship, why is filling the frame and you want to avoid cropping? Why do you think that's fundamental to good photography?
It goes back to me, and I think I'm speaking for my generation of photographers, that especially those of us who shot 35, if you shot Kodachrome or slide film, you didn't know if that piece of film was going to be used postage stamp size or billboard size. It was terribly important to make every single part of that frame count. And so you had the discipline. You had to have the discipline to shoot that way. You also had 36 opportunities, and then you had to change film, and you might miss something in between. So one of the things I try to get people to do is, number one, not crop their photos. And that usually meets with a lot of people aren't too thrilled with that idea. But the point is, it's not to make it more difficult for you. It's for you to actually see what's in your frame. Most people include things in their frames that they don't really mean to be there, and their thought is, well, I'll just crop that out later. But with that kind of an attitude, you're going to end up slicing and dicing and an image down to the point of, you know, it could truly affect the overall fidelity of the image if you're going to make a print. I'm not talking about hairline cropping, and for God's sakes, yes, I have cropped images before. But I can tell you, I'm never happy about it when I do. My feeling is I should have seen it. I should have realized it and dealt with it. But the key word here is having a sense of discipline. And that discipline goes not only with that, it goes with shooting. So many people, you know, shoot with diarrhea of the trigger finger, and they just, and, you know, it's great. You may have the shot. Good luck. Now you got to download and edit all those. So I would say be a little more careful.
Well, you know, in your interview with Anne in your in the journey, she points out that from her perspective, keys to your success were discipline, hard work, curiosity, and technical skills. To which you add one more: people skills. Yeah. So that brings me to this question. So here's my question for you. What's growing up in Texas done to help make you a better photographer?
I'm friendly.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's my nature, but I like people. And I think that, especially in photography, it makes a hell of a difference how you approach someone. Get a lot of people who, you know, are either timid about shooting people or just won't shoot people because they're afraid. And I think it has so much to do with your approach to things and how you do it. And boy, a smile will work wonders. You don't even have to say anything. I mean, so many places I go, I don't even speak the language, but I can, I can make my point known, seen, whatever, simply by, a smile, a wink, whatever. Or a lot of times I'll just, I'll do this. I'll just hold up the camera and is that okay? And if I get the no or the this or that, okay. I don't fight it. I don't fight it because I found so many times I'll go around the corner. I'll be pissed off that I didn't get the shot because, I didn't have the cooperation. But by God, I can tell you so many times something else around that I never would have gone to or seen was there waiting and happened. So, it's what we're doing is great. I love it. I sincerely love it. I think it's amazing that I've made this wonderful life and career doing it, but it ain't brain surgery. And so we do what we love. It makes a big difference.
So I think you've kind of given me a segue there into, let's talk about travel, something no one for the most part has gotten to do in the last year. Let's take a little trip and hear the stories behind first Cuba. And I understand this picture, which is on the back of the book, The Journey, your designer argued maybe should be on the front.
Yeah.
But and clearly you won that battle. But how about this picture? What attracted you to it, and how long did it take you to make it? Tell us the scene a little bit.
I was in the flower market in Havana. I was up early with my class one morning, just walking. We went there. I saw the people. I saw the activity going on. I saw what she was doing. This was hardly planned, but there was this one moment where she had created this kind of bouquet, if you will, and she was preparing to hand it to someone. I made the snap right when she had covered her face with it. And I thought that was actually kind of fun and interesting, a little bit different. But no, by no means was this planned. It was just kind of, again, so much of what we do as photographers is we observe. And by observing, we see possibilities. And this became one of those. Very recent, again, last trip to Cuba. And it's very much something I've worked a lot at over the last few years, and that's working more in layers. I'm working with the telephoto, but working in layers with a wider format, this was 35, is a totally different thing. First thing was building this shot from the background forward. I saw that wall on this playground. I saw the light, how it was late afternoon light hitting it. The shadows are sweeping across the ground. They're playing. And then there was this mix of these kids, some in the shadows, some out in the sunlight, and then some back in the shadows. So it was like a foreground of the little boy in the foreground. It becomes the silhouette foreground. Middle ground of the three boys, one pulling the other guy's shirt. And again, the body language that's going on there, absolutely wonderful. And then the background layer of the little boy in the far distance, also silhouetted, kicking the soccer ball. So this has become more complex, but you still have the same responsibility for everything within a photograph, just as you would if you were using a telephoto lens or anything else. So very, very much about being cognizant of everything within the frame and then what's going on in these various layers. You're trying to see in these spatial relationships and then connect and make your shot.
Execute it. And what did you shoot this one on? What image? What camera? Do you remember?
I think it was the M10P.
M10P on this. I want to get in a question that pertains to this. And Ashley Martin asks, I've heard Sam Abel say over and over, compose the picture and wait. Do you have a similar mantra for the way you approach photography? And as you answer that, we'll move on to another picture.
Sam is a very close, dear friend of mine. People that know me know that. And that's one of several things we agree on. That is his mantra for sure, the compose and wait. And I would say that in that particular shot, that is very much what happened. I spent a tremendous amount of time there because I had these several moving objects. It was so much about the moving objects and where they were relative to light and shadow.
And what about this next one? We're moving to Japan now. And I've chosen Japan and Cuba because not only are those the two most recent countries you visited prior to the pandemic, but also it seems to mark a distinct change in that you are traveling lighter than you ever have before in terms of gear. And so speak to that. And then I'm dying to know the story of this picture, because I've been asking you about it for a couple months now, and wanted to wait till this to hear the story.
Yeah, well, so the fact is, it's maybe not as surreal as you would think. Well, it is surreal looking, but what's going on here is this is at the Kanazawa Art Museum, and it's an installation they have outside, and it's a pool with a plexiglass-like surface at the top. If you follow the lines at the top, the dark lines there at the curve, and you above that you see some figures through that. It actually has water running over it. Underneath here, there's no water. There's actually a tunnel that you descend and go down into, and you're free to walk around and look up through the plex and wave to people up above. Rather than that, I thought that I wanted to do something a little more fun, and I was watching people in my group that came down with me, and this one person began to climb up the ladder, and she started jumping. And I got this moment where her pants legs are like, it looks as though she could be underwater. It looks as though she's floating there. And then you see the figures up above. So I can't take all the credit for the magic here, but it was about the moment and putting myself in a place to where I thought I could do something interesting with it.
One of the tips, Arthur, that you include in your workshops is to try to see things not how they look, but how they could look. And it's so many of the examples, the flags or the laundry on the wall that we looked at earlier, I seem to speak to that idea of how something could look. Go ahead.
That was a lesson from Ernst Haas. Ernst Haas said that, and so much of what he said I committed to memory and try to pass on to my students. But more than that, try to apply them so that we can, make new photographs, see differently, try to take your work to a level. This is a digital art museum in Tokyo, made up of a lot of amazing lights, mirrors, and the people walking through. And it just provided itself with an interesting moment. And the only thing I added to this was, I zoomed a little bit with, I had a small little zoom that I had, and I zoomed with it to kind of give it this stellar star-like look.
Well, in your most recent trips to Japan, you've taken one or two cameras, a Q, an M, and I think a buddy trip you did recently, you took the Leica gear, and also a Hasselblad X-Pan.
Made a trip to Japan with two friends, Sam Abel and George Nobechi, a Japanese-Canadian photographer. And we basically did a train trip from north to south, and I wanted to go light. So I took the Q with the 28, I took the M10 with 35, and I also had a 50 for it, the 50. And I also took a Hasselblad X-Pan, which is a film camera, and but long panoramic horizontals, and that was it. So my telephoto was a 50. And what it does, though, just briefly, is you begin to look and see things differently. You begin to see the possibilities of not having a 300, and now what do I do? Or not having a 20, and now what do I do? So it causes you to move yourself and make new compositions. And that's something that I've worked very hard on the last few years for myself. And fortunately, I think it's worked. I think I've created a lot of new work that is very different than the earlier work.
Well, as we start to reach the end here, I wanted to end with these pictures from Japan, because I got to tell you, Arthur, there's something magical and I dare say spiritual that seems to carry through in your pictures. And I got to ask you, is there something about Japan that you think you're responding to differently, or is it just a matter of where you are with your progression in photography?
A little of both, but mostly Japan. Japan is just an absolutely amazing place for those that have been there. I know some of the people that are watching today have probably been with me on trips there or have been. And the trips that we put together have just, it's not just Tokyo, Kyoto, and Nara. We get out and go to different places. We're planning another trip for November of 21, if all's well, and it'll be in a different area. But it does, Tom, it does. There's a Japanese aesthetic that comes across, and I think it touches everyone who goes. And it definitely has a bearing on your photography, how you see, how you approach things, and only positive things.
And just in terms of process, you come back from a trip, and I imagine many people listening are anxious for another chance to, their next chance to travel. But how have you used this time, the last, year really, since you made your last trip to Japan? Do you typically look at your pictures right away, or is there an editing process that you can share with us that you think is important in terms of spacing the trip from the edit?
Yeah. Well, I do an edit fairly soon thereafter, and I'm usually editing out the obvious mistakes, problems, whatever. I'm things I didn't mean, and then I'm marking close ones and twos. But before I get down and make finals, I'll put them away. I think the best thing I can do in way of advice to you is to tell y'all time and space. That's best examples for dealing with editing, because then the smells, the taste, the whatever you had to do to get it, that's all gone. Now you're looking at the image for what the image is. Keep in mind, people look at your work. It shouldn't really rely on a title. In fact, I generally don't like titles. I think place and date's enough, but it shouldn't. It should connect with people just for what it is. And then if there's a story to be told, you can tell that another time. It should stand on its own. And I think too often people kind of get hung up on that. But putting time and space between you and when you took the picture is the best way to, I think, make good picks. And I know from experience, because so many times I picked things and gone back 6 months or a year or 2 or 5 or 10 years later and went, holy shit, that was the wrong thing. I should have picked this one, and here's why. And part of it is we as photographers, if we do this enough, we gain a thing I call photographic maturity. And that maturity happens with time and our ability to understand and accept and realize why photographs work or don't work. And that's it. It's that easy.
Well, as we start to get to the end here, Arthur, I understand this picture we're looking at now is one of the last pictures you made on your last trip to Japan. Can you share the story? We've got time for one more story. Can you share the story behind this?
Sure. It was made from the last trip coming back from February, right? Coming back to the pandemic, actually. That's my friend George. George was going off to make another shot. I hung back, but there was this one beautiful moonlit shot. We had a full moon, snow. We're up in upper Hokkaido. We had been shooting the cranes and swans. And end of the day, we started basically chasing moonlight, and found this one opening where there was the volcano off in the distance there. And so it seemed like a perfect place to make a snap and say, sayonara.
Well, I would tell you that one of the things it seems to me that you've gotten, I don't know if it's a family characteristic or growing up in Texas, but you're a great storyteller. And I've seen you in action with students, and I'm so glad that you took the time to sit with us today and share a few of your stories. I want to share with the audience how to stay in touch with you. And maybe before the stay in touch with you, we'll let people know there is, at least at last check, 2 spots left in your upcoming workshop for Leica. You teach a variety of places throughout the year, and I'm hopeful, if I can twist your arm, I'll get you to come back after this program sells out.
Yes, I think we talked about this, and besides this March, I think we will probably do in April or May. Yeah, for anybody that's interested, love to have you. It'll be an online class. We'll go over a bunch more tools. It'll be in depth. It's an intensive 5 days, but we cover a lot and talk to people that have done it. I think you'll find they got a lot out of it.
Well, I'd like your story about taking a workshop with Ernst Haas. I know for a fact that you have been that turning point for a lot of people, and the choice of a good workshop instructor can really make that difference. So I would encourage people to check out your website for your ongoing workshops. If anyone's interested in picking up a copy of The Journey, they can order that directly from you. Arthur, it's been an absolute pleasure. I can't wait till I have an opportunity to have a drink with you and see you in person. Thank you.
Absolutely, Tom. Thank you. And everybody, thank you so much for showing up today. I wished I could see you, but I virtually see you. So until we can all hug and kiss, adieu.
We'll see you all next time for Leica Conversations. Thanks for being here.